The city of Dnipro lay under a shroud of smoke and ash, the air thick with the acrid scent of burnt concrete and fear. Detective Kaelen Voss stood before the skeletal remains of a multi-story apartment building, its facade torn open like a gaping wound. The Russian missile had struck with brutal precision, leaving behind a scene of devastation that spoke of both power and indifference. Kaelen, a man whose sharp features were mirrored by his even sharper mind, moved through the rubble with a practiced eye. He was not here to assign blame for the war, that was a fool's errand, but to uncover the truth behind a specific death, one that had been lost in the chaos of the larger attack. Among the 4 confirmed fatalities was a man named Dr. Aris Thorn, a British historian and journalist who had been living in Dnipro for the past year. The official report listed Thorn as a civilian casualty, another victim of Russia's relentless assault on Ukraine's infrastructure. But Kaelen's instincts told him there was more to the story. Thorn had been digging into the origins of a new Russian drone, one that had been used with devastating effect in recent strikes. His research had made him enemies, not just on the Russian side, but possibly among those who profited from the shadows of war. Kaelen's investigation began in Thorn's apartment, a space that had been miraculously spared the worst of the blast. The rooms were neat, almost sterile, with books stacked in precise towers and papers organized in labeled folders. It was the sanctum of a meticulous mind, a mind that had been silenced just as it was on the verge of a breakthrough. On Thorn's desk, Kaelen found a partially written article, its title stark and damning: The Drone Conspiracy, How Russia's New Technology is Tied to a Global Network of Arms Dealers. The article named names, linked shell corporations, and traced the flow of money and technology across continents. It was a bombshell, one that could have exposed a web of corruption stretching from Moscow to the heart of Europe. But it was the notes scribbled in the margins that caught Kaelen's attention. Thorn had circled a name, Viktor Petrov, a Russian oligarch with ties to the Kremlin and a reputation for ruthlessness. Next to the name, Thorn had written a single cryptic phrase: the meeting in Kyiv he knows. Kaelen's pulse quickened. The meetings? He had heard whispers of a clandestine gathering in Kyiv, a back-channel negotiation between Ukrainian officials and Russian sympathizers. It was a rumor dismissed by most as wartime paranoia. But Thorn's notes suggested it was real and that Petrov had been a key player. The detective's next step was to find out who else knew about the meeting. Thorn's contacts were a who's who of journalists, activists, and informants, but one name stood out: Lena, a Ukrainian intelligence officer who had been feeding Thorn information. Kaelen found her in a dimly lit cafe in the city's underground, a place where secrets were traded as easily as coffee. Lena was wary, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. She confirmed Thorn's suspicions about Petrov, but added a new layer of complexity. Petrov wasn't just an arms dealer. He was a puppet master, pulling the strings of both Russian and Ukrainian operatives. The meeting in Kyiv had been about more than just drones. It was about shaping the future of the war, and Petrov intended to be the one holding the reins. As Kaelen delved deeper, the danger grew. He was followed, his apartment searched, and his sources threatened. It was clear that Petrov's reach extended far beyond the battlefield, into the very fabric of the city. But Kaelen was relentless, driven by a need to uncover the truth no matter the cost. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source: a teenage drone enthusiast who had been tracking the new Russian drones out of curiosity. The kid had intercepted a transmission, a fragment of a conversation between Petrov and one of his contacts. The message was brief but damning: Thorn is a problem. Deal with him. Make it look like the Russians. Kaelen knew then that Thorn's death was no accident. It was a targeted assassination, a calculated move to silence a man who had gotten too close to the truth. The missile that had destroyed the apartment building was not just an act of war. It was a message, a warning to anyone who dared to challenge Petrov's empire. With the evidence in hand, Kaelen prepared to make his move. But as he stepped out into the rain-slicked streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap. Petrov was not a man who left loose ends, and Kaelen had just become one of them. The end came quickly, as it often does in such stories. A shot in the dark, a sudden silence, and the detective fell, his notebook clutched in his hand. The last thing he saw was the glint of a rifle scope, a reminder that in war, the line between hero and victim is often drawn in blood. In the aftermath, Thorn's article was published, its revelations sending shockwaves through the international community. Petrov's empire crumbled, his name synonymous with treachery and deceit. But for Kaelen, there was no justice, no recognition. He was just another casualty in a war that had already claimed too many. And so the city of Dnipro continued to burn, its skies filled with the smoke of a conflict that showed no signs of ending. But somewhere in the rubble, a truth had been uncovered, a truth that had cost a good man his life. And in the end, that was all that mattered.